Imagine an age when the map of the world bore little resemblance to the one we know today. For more than 60 million years after the extinction of the dinosaurs, South America stood as a colossal island, completely cut off from the rest of the world by vast oceans. This prolonged isolation transformed the southern continent into a biological laboratory unlike any other in Earth's history. Here, evolution ventures down its most bizarre and radical paths, giving rise to saber-toothed predatory marsupials, giant ground sloths towering as high as buildings, and enormous flightless carnivorous birds. Meanwhile, in the north, placental mammals were undergoing relentless trials across the immense supercontinent of Afro-Eurasia. At that time, North America and South America were like two separate planets, each ruled by its own laws of survival and monarchs unaware of one another's existence. Yet deep beneath the ocean floor, shifting tectonic plates were quietly preparing a fateful collision. Around 3 million years ago, a narrow strip of land began to rise from the surging seas, binding the two continents together, the Isthmus of Panama. The emergence of this land bridge not only altered global ocean currents and pushed Earth into an ice age, but also flung open the gates to a historic migration. Known to scientists as the Great American Biotic Interchange, GABI, this was the moment when the two greatest biological armies of the Western Hemisphere finally confronted one another. On one side stood the elite warriors of the North, forged by fierce competition across open continents. On the other were the strange beasts of the South, rulers of their isolated stronghold for tens of millions of years without rivals. This encounter was no peaceful exchange, but the beginning of one of the most brutal biological purges in history. The tranquil valleys of South America soon became battlefields, where native marsupials were forced to face placental predators that were more intelligent and more ruthless. The Panama land bridge became a road to glory for some and a death sentence for others. Could the southern monsters defend their kingdom, or would they vanish forever beneath the claws of northern invaders? The journey into this great interchange reveals the cost of isolation and the absolute ruthlessness of evolution when two worlds are compelled to become one. It was no accident that this great biological purge unfolded, for before it began, we must first behold the beauty of South America when it still stood as an isolated fortress. For tens of millions of years, this continent resembled a world apart, where evolution shaped creatures that followed none of the patterns seen elsewhere on Earth. Instead of placental mammals dominating as they did across Eurasia, South America became a paradise for marsupials and extraordinarily unusual native ungulate groups. At the top of the terrestrial food chain stood marsupial killers known as Thylacomilis, though it closely resembled the saber-toothed cats of the north. Thylacomilis was in fact a marsupial, armed with terrifying elongated canines that grew continuously throughout its life, protected by bony sheaths projecting from the lower jaw. It stands as a perfect example of convergent evolution, where two unrelated species developed nearly identical weapons to solve the same challenge of survival. Alongside these marsupial predators reigned a dynasty of slow-moving yet seemingly unstoppable herbivorous giants, the ground sloths. The most famous was Megatherium, a colossal sloth weighing up to 8,800 pounds. When rearing onto its hind legs, it could reach nearly 20 feet tall, powerful enough to snap branches far above the reach of any other animal. Its immense body, cloaked in thick fur and armed with scythe-like claws, made Megatherium a living fortress, with virtually no natural predators daring to attack it. Beneath the feet of these giants roamed Glyptodon, relatives of armadillos, yet built on the scale of a Volkswagen Beetle. They bore a massive domed bony armor and a spiked tail like a mace, ready to crush any attacker bold enough to strike from behind. South America was also home to strange ungulates such as Macraucania, a creature resembling a fusion of camel and elephant, complete with a peculiar short trunk, and Toxodon with the body of a rhinoceros but the teeth of a rodent, grazing along the banks of ancient rivers. This ecosystem functioned in steady rhythm within the lush tropical and subtropical environments of the island continent. The native species of South America had no need to run swiftly or develop large brains to contend with cunning predators from distant lands. They evolved instead to grow immense, heavily armored, and highly specialized for the abundant local food sources. This long-standing stability within their evolutionary laboratory ultimately rendered them vulnerable when the gates of Panama swung open. The fortress of South America stood firm against threats from within, yet it was utterly unprepared for invasion by unfamiliar forces from the north. It was a world radiant, unhurried, and vibrant, standing on the brink of collapse as the fateful bridge began to rise from the sea. Around 3 million years ago, a quiet yet devastating geological event unfolded in the region now known as Central America. The violent collision between the Pacific Plate and the Caribbean Plate forced Earth's crust upward from beneath the waters. A chain of volcanic islands gradually fused together, forming a long yet resilient strip of land, the Isthmus of Panama. This land bridge was more than a migration route. It was a geological blade slicing the world's oceans in two. Before the rise of the Isthmus of Panama, warm waters from the Atlantic Ocean flowed freely into the Pacific, maintaining a stable balance of global temperatures. When that gateway slammed shut, ocean currents were blocked and redirected northward, giving rise to the Gulf Stream flowing toward Europe. This shift triggered violent climatic upheavals, helping drive Earth into cycles of ice ages marked by prolonged and unforgiving winters. For the creatures of South America, the Isthmus of Panama became the key that opened a Pandora's box of calamities from the north. At first, this narrow strip of land formed a humid jungle corridor, a biological filter funnel allowing only the most adaptable species to pass. Pressure from shrinking habitats and climate shifts in North America pushed the most intelligent predators to seek passage southward. In the opposite direction, the slow-moving giants of South America also began venturing north in search of new grasslands. Yet this bridge was not a fair crossing. It resembled a one-way road shaped by the cruelty of nature. While North American species were accustomed to long migrations and harsh climatic extremes, South American species had become deeply dependent on stable tropical environments. The emergence of the Isthmus of Panama shattered more than 60 million years of isolation of the South American island continent in a fleeting geological instant. It marked a fateful turning point where ancient rules of survival were erased to make way for a new world order written in blood and loss. This land bridge became the starting point of the largest biological invasion ever witnessed in the Western Hemisphere. Two entirely different animal worlds now stood a single step apart, and the Great Purge was about to begin. As the Isthmus of Panama took full form, an army of the North's most formidable warriors began pouring southward like an unstoppable flood. This was no random migration, but the expansion of placental mammals forged through millions of years of ruthless competition across the supercontinent of Afro-Eurasia before reaching North America. At the forefront of this invading force stood Smilodon, the legendary saber-toothed cat with rippling muscles and dagger-like fangs. Unlike the southern marsupial saber-tooth Thylacosmilus, Smilodon possessed a larger brain, the ability to coordinate in packs, and limb bones built for explosive, lightning-fast pounces. Alongside the saber-toothed cats came ancient wolves, the American cheetah, And most formidable of all, the short-faced bear, Arctodus simus, the largest terrestrial carnivore of its time. These northern killers carried with them an entirely new survival philosophy: intelligence, speed, and an extraordinary level of social cooperation. Marching with this carnivorous army were advanced ungulates such as ancient horses, dwarf camels, mastodons, and various species of deer. Why were the creatures of North America considered more elite than their southern counterparts? The answer lay in the harsh northern environments where animals were forced to adapt constantly to seasonal extremes. Scarce food supplies, and deadly chases across vast open grasslands. North American fauna tended to possess more efficient metabolisms, faster reproductive cycles, and above all, highly complex immune systems. When they stepped into the lush territories of South America, these invaders resembled hardened legions sweeping into a kingdom long lulled by peace. They competed not only for food, but also carried unfamiliar pathogens against which South American marsupials had never developed defenses. North American herbivores with long legs and swift strides rapidly took control of the Pampean grasslands, forcing native ungulates into retreat. Meanwhile, saber-toothed cats and wolves began to realize that the slow-moving ground sloths and strange southern ungulates were easy prey. This invasion did not unfold in a single day, yet each newly arrived North American species drove another fracture through South America's already fragile ecosystem. The northern warriors brought with them the ruthlessness of an open continent, prepared to crush any biological barrier to establish a new order. Under this overwhelming pressure, the fortress of South America began to tremble, signaling that a vast purification was imminent. Yet despite being outmatched by the elite northern forces, the South American ecosystem did not collapse without delivering a fierce response. The great interchange was not entirely a one-way passage. The southern monsters also began a proud march northward. The most formidable representative of this counteroffensive was the family Phorusrhacidae, known by the haunting name terror birds. These were flightless birds standing up to nearly 10 feet tall, with powerful legs capable of sprinting across the plains at extraordinary speed. Their most terrifying weapon was a massive beak, hard as steel, curving downward into a razor-sharp hook at its tip. Unlike North American carnivorous mammals that relied on tearing jaws, the terror bird struck with vertical blows of immense force, powerful enough to pierce the skulls of ancient northern horses. They were the only southern representatives to truly establish dominance in parts of North America, including what is now Florida for an extended period. Alongside the terror birds, the armored giants Glyptodon and the colossal ground sloth Megatherium slowly advanced northward. Their sheer muscular strength and near impenetrable armor forced even northern saber-toothed cats to approach with caution. Beyond these giants, smaller yet more resilient groups carried out a quieter invasion. Armadillos, anteaters, and the marsupial opossum proved to be remarkable survivors, relying not on brute force, but on unusual specialization to endure. The opossum, with its rapid reproduction and omnivorous diet, became the only South American marsupial to survive and flourish across North America to this day. Yet this counteroffensive faced an invisible but unforgiving barrier: climate. While North American animals were accustomed to cold and arid conditions, South American species were children of rainforests and tropical wetlands. As they pushed northward, they confronted wind-swept grasslands and freezing winters where food grew scarce and the landscape offered little shelter. The southern response, though it brought moments of terror to North American ecosystems, remained far weaker overall than the opposing wave. The southern monsters carried the beauty of isolation, yet that very isolation deprived them of the flexibility needed to conquer a new continent. The clashes between terror birds and wolves, or between ground sloths and the short-faced bear, became the final chapters in the pride of an island continent slowly fading away. As the two biological armies converged upon the Panamanian land bridge, a silent yet ruthless purge unfolded, sweeping away the most ancient dynasties of South America. This was not an extinction that struck in a single moment, but a cascading collapse spanning hundreds of thousands of years, in which the vulnerable were driven into the dead ends of oblivion. The first and most tragic victims were the native carnivorous marsupials, such as Thylacosmilus. Despite wielding terrifying saber fangs, this marsupial possessed a smaller brain and far less behavioral flexibility than its northern rival, Smilodon. In the struggle for prey, such as ground sloths and ancient horses, the North American saber-toothed cats, hunting in coordinated groups, swiftly claimed the fertile grasslands. Thylacosmilus, once accustomed to reigning alone, suddenly found itself redundant within its own homeland. It was outmatched not only in social strength, but also in hunting efficiency. The disappearance of these marsupial predators left a vast ecological void, immediately filled by wolves, jaguars, and the short-faced bear descending from the north. The purge proved even more merciless for native ungulates such as Toxodon and Macrauchenia. These creatures had evolved to graze on South America's distinctive vegetation, yet the arrival of northern horses and camels fundamentally altered the structure of the plant communities. Northern ungulates possessed more durable teeth and digestive systems better adapted to a wide variety of plants, driving native species toward starvation upon the very plains they once knew. Beyond the battle for food, an invisible biological weapon ravaged South American populations. Disease. North American animals carried parasites and viruses inherited from Eurasia, against which they had forged immunity over millions of years. In contrast, South American mammals, shaped within the sterile confines of prolonged isolation, had no resistance to these unfamiliar pathogens. Waves of epidemics swept through herds of ground sloths and marsupials, weakening reproduction and pushing them to the brink of extinction before predators ever struck. Even the proud terror birds, once feared by all, gradually lost their dominance as mammalian carnivores began preying upon their eggs and young. The struggle was not defined by muscle alone, but by intelligence and the capacity to adapt to harsh climatic shifts. By the end of the Pleistocene, more than half of South America's native mammal families had vanished entirely from the face of the earth. This purge stands as a testament to the severity of evolution. When two isolated worlds collide, those unable to change at the pace of their rivals are eliminated without mercy. South America, once a kingdom of the extraordinary, slowly became an extension of the North American ecosystem, leaving behind only faint echoes of its former glory. Although the biological purge swept away most of the ancient dynasties, South America today has not become a mere replica of the North. Within the dense Amazon rainforests and across wind-swept grasslands, the great survivors still endure, carrying the bloodline of the primordial island continent. The most resilient of them belong to the order Xenothra, including sloths, anteaters, and armadillos. While colossal relatives such as Megatherium and Glyptodon fell to climate shifts and predatory pressure, their smaller descendants found a path to survival. Modern sloths abandoned the perilous ground for the safety of the forest canopy, turning slowness into a flawless strategy of concealment from the claws of jaguars. Anteaters chose an ecological niche few northern mammals pursued. massive ant and termite colonies sealed within stone-hard fortresses. Armadillos, protected by flexible armor and equipped with remarkable burrowing skill, not only held their ground at home, but became among the few southern species to expand deep into North America. Another astonishing name among the survivors is the marsupial opossum. While all the giant carnivorous marsupials of the South were eliminated by Smilodon and wolves, the opossum flourished through its omnivorous diet and extraordinary reproductive capacity. It stands as the final living legacy of South America's marsupial dynasty, present from the forests of Canada to the landscapes of Argentina. Yet when we observe modern South American fauna, a strange fusion emerges. More than half of its mammal species trace their origins to the north. The jaguar, the llama, and the capybara, though descended from South American rodents, yet radiating after the Great American Biotic Interchange, have become defining faces of the continent. The biodiversity of the Western Hemisphere today is the result of intermingling and relentless competition following the rise of the Panamanian land bridge. The legacy of this great interchange lies not only in the species that survived, but in the new ecological balance that shapes the present world. South America lost much of its primordial strangeness, yet in return gained a more intricate biological system, better equipped to withstand global upheavals. These living relics remain as low, resonant notes within a new symphony, reminding us of a distant golden age. Their survival proves that in the race of evolution, it is not always the largest or the strongest that ultimately prevail. It was intelligent specialization and masterful concealment that allowed them to slip through fate's narrow passage when two worlds collided. The rise of the Panamanian land bridge is not merely an old chapter in paleontology textbooks, but a profound lesson in the fragility of isolated ecosystems. It reveals that even the most tranquil paradise, if deprived of friction and competition from the outside world, can become dangerously vulnerable. South America was once a formidable stronghold of colossal beasts, yet its prolonged stability robbed them of the flexibility needed to confront sudden upheaval. The first lesson is the cost of over-specialization. When a species survives only within a single environment, it digs its own grave the moment that environment changes. Beyond that, the event of the Great American Biotic Interchange serves as an early warning about biological invasion, a crisis humanity now faces. In the past, nature required millions of years to unite two continents, yet today, humans can transport alien species across oceans in mere days by air or sea. What Smilodon once did to South American marsupials is now echoed as native species confront invaders carried by human hands. The ruthlessness of evolution offers no mercy. It recognizes only survival or extinction. The Isthmus of Panama reminds us that the world is in constant motion and that connection always brings painful yet transformative purges that shape greater diversity. Without that bridge, giant ground sloths might still roam, yet we would never witness the richness of jaguars, horses, or modern South American camelids. Evolution does not pause to mourn the fallen. It builds upon their remains to give rise to more adaptive forms. Through the lesson of Panama, we glimpse a planet that continually renews itself through storms of collision. Today, as we stand before the immense fossils of Megatherium or the strange jaws of Thylacophilus in museums, we hear echoes of a vanished age. The South American plains now lie silent, no longer shaken by the armored tread of Glyptodon or the slicing cries of the terror birds. The Great American Biotic Interchange has receded into deep time, yet its aftershocks persist in every branch, every blade of grass, and in the veins of every creature that runs across this continent. The Panamanian land bridge is more than a geographic structure. It is a symbol of convergence, where the destinies of two worlds were bound together through brutal struggles for survival. We mourn the disappearance of the South's extraordinary monsters, yet we must also acknowledge the relentless vitality of the northern invaders. This great purge forms part of evolution's symphony, where outdated notes fade to make way for melodies more intricate and new. The Sahara had Spinosaurus. North America had T-Rex. But only in South America do we witness a truly cinematic saga of an isolated fortress brought to collapse. The echoes from the ancient plains remind humanity that change is the only constant of the universe, and connection, though often painful, is the force that drives life toward ever greater refinement. As we close this epic of the great American biotic interchange, we look forward with deeper understanding of the natural world. A world without eternal barriers, where every creature stands as a warrior in the endless journey of life.